What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, the daily episode today. I'm the host here, Haize, holding down for C-Dub and Bobby, the Kanye boys, who are my co-hosts on this show. In today's daily episode, we're going to be talking about Darnell Mooney being named as the Bears' most underrated player by NFL Wire. We'll also be talking about things that the Bears can do to have a successful season, even if that doesn't mean a number of wins for the Chicago Bears. And then lastly, we'll be breaking it down and talking about Velus Jones' comments when asked about his age and what that means about the doubt for him in his rookie season. We'll get into all that and more on today's Chicago Bears Central.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
All right, Bears fans. So first up, we're jumping right into it. NFL Wire, that has a series of different websites for specific teams, did their voting on the most underrated player for each team. And for the Chicago Bears, they named Darnell Mooney as the most underrated player on the Chicago Bears, which I was a little bit surprised by, but it kind of makes sense. That, you know, I said it yesterday as far as like Darnell Mooney still having a lot to prove. There are questions about Darnell Mooney if he's a true number one on a winning team, right? If he can be the number one wide receiver on a team that wins. Now, that probably won't be answered this season because we don't expect the Bears to get a lot of wins this season. And if they do get a lot of wins, then that answer is definitely going to be there. But Darnell Mooney's probably, to me, one of the most, surefire things on the Chicago Bears. As far as he's going to get output. He's going to give you over 1,000 yards receiving. He's going to be Justin Fields' number one target. I think a lot of the questions surrounding Darnell Mooney, for me at least, is that if he can do that as the number one guy, because how you're defended as the clear number one option, especially when you don't have a lot of surefire big name options next to you in that wide receiver core, is going to change a lot about how Darnell Mooney's guarded, how he has to go about getting those yards, getting those receptions, and how much tougher it may be on Darnell Mooney this season, considering all those things going into it. But to see him named as the most underrated Bears player, like I said, I understand it in some ways. I disagree with it in some. But at the end of the day, I do understand. And like we said before, and like I liked it in my whole creative career, understanding and agreeing are two vastly different things. And I think a lot of time what leads to some of the discontent or vitriolic conversations that happen between fans of teams and things like that is that people don't forget that they don't have to agree to understand. So while I don't necessarily agree that Darnell Mooney's our most underrated player, I do think that because of the question marks that he has a lot with, I can definitely understand a lot of that. Luke Getsy's offense, how is that going to maximize Darnell Mooney's skills and him and Justin Fields and their chemistry as well? What does that happen? He's going to be the top wide receiver for the Chicago Bears clearly this season. Now, we'll talk about Velus Jones later in this. I've already talked about Byron Pringle heavily since this show has started, but really looking at it and the fact that Darnell Mooney 142 receptions ranks only behind Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. Like, that's it. Other than that, of wide receivers drafted since 2020, Darnell Mooney is right up there. So because of that, listen, it's gonna happen. He's going to get his receptions this year unless something goes terribly, terribly wrong. But he's now the clear number one option. And let me know down below, who do you think is the most underrated Chicago Bear? Me personally, I'm going to pick Cole Kmet here. That's my most underrated Chicago Bear. And I think a lot of that does because of Nagy's offense and how he wasn't used correctly, his lack of touchdown receptions, things like that. I personally view Cole Kmet as one of the most underrated players on the Chicago Bears. And I think he's going to have a big season as well and be utilized a lot better than what he was in Nagy's offense as we move over to Luke Getsy's offense. But let me know that down below. Who do you think is the most underrated player on the Chicago Bears? You can give me one for offense, one for defense if you want, or you can give me one overall. Let me know that down below. Next topic today, we're going to talk about how the Chicago Bears can have a successful season, even if it doesn't mean the number of wins, right? There's a couple of things that we're looking forward to in this season that we need to see as we continue to build towards the team. One of those first is going to be, as it is with everything when you're talking about with the Chicago Bears, is Justin Fields. How much does he develop this year? If you get a season that Justin Fields and the way that he leads the team, the way that he commands the offense, his understanding of Luke Getsy's offense, things like that, it's going to make the Bears season a success, in my opinion, even if that number of wins isn't higher, isn't what we hope that it will be or thinks that it will be. As Fields continues to grasp his understanding of that offense, as he continues to feel more comfortable in his decision-making, as he continues to show just his a better decision-making and a command of that offense, If he does that in this season, that's going to make this season a success in a way, in my eyes, because that's really what this season is about. Development, in my opinion. That's what it's about. It's about the development of not only Justin Fields, but also, like I said, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney as the number one wide receiver, the offensive line, all the questions down there. It's about development, and Justin Fields' development is one of the key factors in all of that. So Justin Fields and his development and what he shows this season is one of the ways that we can have success without necessarily a ton of wins coming via that to mark that success. Next up is Matt Eberflus. What does Matt Eberflus, how does this change of culture, I've talked about it. We've seen the change of culture so far, OTAs, mini camps, things like that. But once the season starts, right? Once the losses come, once the wins come, how do they handle those type of things? How this culture develops, how this culture changes, how Matt Eberflus commands this team and leads this team as the head coach is going to be one of the biggest signs of success for the Chicago Bears season this season. Again, because this isn't a season where, like, win-wise, if the Bears make the playoffs, that makes this season a huge success, right? No matter what the number of wins are. But outside of that, outside of the number of wins, how Matt Eberflus really leads this team, changes the culture, shows what he can do as the head coach, changes the defense. We've talked, the defense has been on a steady decline basically since 2018. How does he stave that off? Does it even out as we look to improve in the offseason next season? All those questions is going to be a big one. As we look to Matt Eberflus, a year one head coach in the NFL, what is the growth of this team? What's the growth of him, his play calling, all that, the coaching staff as a whole? How does it look from week 1 to week 17? What's the change of that? And to that, right? Let's not even just put it on Matt Eberflus. It's also on Luke Getsy and the coaching staff as a whole. Matt Eberflus is the head coach. Luke Getsy is that offensive coordinator. What growth do they have from week 1 to week 17? If that growth is substantial, if they show that the players are getting a command of that and an understanding of the coaching scheme on both sides of the ball, that's a way that we can measure success. As long as Matt Eberflus shows in year one that he's a competent head coach and is going to be the coach to really develop and get the most out of a lot of these young players that we have, that's what's going to make this Chicago Bears season a successful season in my eyes. The next one up, the rookies on this team. How do the rookies develop? When you talk about Gordon, Brisker, Velus Jones Jr., the three rookies we may have starting on our offensive line. If those rookies develop, or if those rookies show that they belong like we think they are, it's almost a foregone conclusion. We expect Gordon and Brisker to show that, but as well as the other ones, Jones Jr., the rookies on the offensive line, if they have a steal in one of those, right? If Velus Jones Jr. shows up bigger than what people are expecting him to, if those offensive linemen, those rookie offensive linemen, not only start on that offensive line, but then go on to show that they're not just placeholders for when you can find better offensive linemen. These are part of the Bears' future on the offensive line. If those things show, that is a success in my eyes for the 2022-23 season for the Chicago Bears. Next up, we're going to get into this last one here. What's the last way that we can measure the Chicago Bears' success if it doesn't come by wins? And that is the leaps that players make. Whether it is, I'm looking at Travis Gibson, right? What does Gibson show? Especially if Robert Quinn's gone, right? What does that, how does he show as the edge rusher for the Chicago Bears? Does he show enough and make a leap enough to where you start looking at him and saying, hey, this is a hell of a piece here, more so than the question mark. Well, we know he has potential, but if he makes that leap to show that he's clearly a starter on the NFL level and a damn good one, that's really going to be a huge measure of success as we look to continue to tweak the roster with all the cap space that we have. And then the person that I just mentioned as my most underrated player on the Chicago Bears, Cole Kmet. If Cole Kmet has a leap this season where he actually gets touchdowns, he keeps getting that good yardage per reception, he shows being that safety valve, as I call it, for Justin Fields, you're looking at just the two leaps from those players. And then also Larry Borum, right? Larry Borum, throwing him in there as well. If those three players that I mentioned in that have leaps this season, that's a success. Again, it doesn't necessarily make the whole season a successful season, but those are successes that we can pull away from looking at this Bears season that isn't going to probably be the most wins. Well, again, we'll see what happens with that. And then when it comes to the positions, the key positions in the NFL, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, cornerback, edge, offensive tackle, right? We don't have a lot of known commodities at that place. Well, again, Justin Fields has a lot to prove. We already talked about Darnell Mooney. I talked about Cole Kmet. We know what we have in the secondary and things like that. If we see leaps at those positions, at any of those positions, much less all of those positions, which we could see, we could literally see a leap at every one of those positions this season. And if we do, that really does make this season, in my eyes, a success for the Chicago Bears. Now, let's go ahead and get into the last one, the last topic for today. Well, before we get into that, what are some of the things that you're looking at from the Chicago Bears players, coaching staff, whatever, that would say that this season is a success or a success that we can pull away from it, even if the wins don't come? Let me know that down below as well. Let's go ahead and move into the next one. So I love Velus Jones, and every time that the more and more I see from this kid, the more and more I hear from him, I like it more and more. So Velus Jones was interviewed by NFL Network's Adam Rank, and he was asked about his age, and this is what he says. People talk about it, but it don't matter. I'm a baller at the end of the day. I know what I can do. Me being 25 years old is not going to stop me from running past people to score touchdowns and stuff like that. I'm going to be fast for a long time, strong for a long time, and making plays for a long time, so it's really irrelevant. We all know, if you've been an NFL fan long enough, if you watched this game long enough, wide receivers with big personalities, with confidence, it's something so special as long as that success comes on the field as well. Velus Jones having that confidence, which he displayed in that one, the confidence in himself, the fact that he's trusting and betting on himself to be able to go out there and wow people and play in this game and be successful in it. It just makes me so excited. I don't know, like I said, I was one of the people who were down on the fact that the Bears passed up some other wide receivers in the draft. I can admit that. But again, taking away and being objective in the way that I look at this team and looking at, hey, my hopes for who this team drafted really mean nothing, right? At the end of the day, what this Bears front office did when they went out and drafted the players that they did, and they looked at Velus Jones and said, hey, this is the guy that we're going to bet on, right? Seeing that, for me, I have to put my own hopes aside as far as who I wanted to see the Bears draft, and then look at this and say, listen, yeah, I wanted the Bears to draft a different wide receiver, but I'm still liking what I'm seeing from this guy. And it kind of makes it more special in a way too, because he had further to go. Had the Bears, for example, drafted Pickens, for example, he wouldn't have had as much to wow me, because I wanted the Bears to draft Pickens. But because Velus Jones wasn't on my radar, and now that the Bears and him as a player have me excited to see what this guy can do in the NFL in his rookie year, just says a lot to me as far as like how much this guy's in the amount that he's able to show so far, right? You're only able to show so much until the games actually start. But once the Chicago Bears start playing games, we are about 30 days away, right, from the first preseason game. We're 60 or so days away from the actual start of the season. But because we're getting to that place, I'm getting more and more excited. And this comment from Velus Jones it really hit me, right? And I want to see improvement. Everything has to be proved on the field. You can talk all day long, but if it's not proven on the field, that's why I did say that. Like, yes, wide receivers with confidence, wide receivers with big personalities are a big part of this game. But you have to produce to do so. And if he comes out and produces, I'm telling you guys this, right? I'm going to make a wild prediction right here. I'm going to say Velus Jones has the second most receiving yards and the second most touchdown. No, because I think Cole Kmet's going to have more touchdown receptions, because I think that they're going to use him a little bit better. But I say that Velus Jones is probably going to have a better overall season than Byron Pringle. Don't be surprised with that. Don't be surprised if we're talking about Velus Jones maybe having a lot of more receptions than Byron Pringle. And I know some people are going to see this and be like, Haize, you are really tripping with this. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. And I very well may be drinking the Kool-Aid. I can admit that. But I really like it. And when like I said, looking at his speed, his size, where he was drafted, I've constantly compared him to Knox. And I really do think we're going to see that type of season. And it may not be until the second year where he really makes that leap. But I'm looking at Velus Jones to be able to come in and wow some people and turn some heads. And a lot of Bears fans that did hope, C-Dub, one of my co-hosts here, who wanted the Bears to draft Pickens right along with me. Don't be surprised if Velus Jones changes a lot of those Bears fans' minds over the course of his first NFL season. But let me know down below, what do you guys think about Velus Jones? What do you think about his comments? Are you crazy like me? Are you starting to buy into this kid a little bit more? Let me know everything down below. And thank you for tuning in to Chicago Bears Central. If you want to follow the show, you can do so at Chi Bears Central on Twitter and Instagram that we're on. We're about to start a TikTok where we can release shorter, more updated type videos. So be on the lookout for us there and follow us there. If you want to send any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearsCentral@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text and our voicemail to be played on the mailbag episodes, I'm going to start making Fridays mailbag episodes. So Fridays mailbag, if we get something, that's when those will be played. So if you want to get something played on our Friday mailbag episodes, make sure you do so. 773-270-2799. That is it for me for today. Thank you for tuning in to Chicago Bears Central. Bear down, y'all, man. Season is coming very, very soon. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.